I'm Evelyn. I'm 35. And the woman who stood at my altar and said my vows was my identical twin, and the man who kissed her knew the difference before the reception ended. He just chose to never say it out loud. This is a story about mirrors. About what happens when the person who shares your face decides they want your life more than you do, and what you become when you realize that even the people who claim to love you can't tell where you end and your shadow begins. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories, where we tell quiet stories about families, about the selves we lose and the selves we steal, and about the strength it takes to reclaim a name that someone else wore better. If a story ever made you feel less alone, that's why we're here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's walk through this one together. Here's my story. The night before my wedding, Vivian showed up at my apartment with a bottle of tequila and mascara running down her cheeks. This was not unusual. Vivian appeared with tears and alcohol the way other people appeared with weather updates. Predictable, frequent, requiring response but not alarm. For 30 years, I'd been the twin who cleaned up, who covered, who made the excuses that allowed Vivian to be wild while I remained responsible. It was our language, our balance, the unspoken contract that had defined us since birth. "Ev," she said, collapsing onto my couch, the couch I'd bought with my own money from my own job, the first furniture in my first apartment that wasn't hand-me-down or shared. "I need to tell you something huge." I sat across from her, still in my rehearsal dinner dress, still smelling of the Italian restaurant where Daniel had toasted our future, where my colleagues had patted his shoulder and told him how lucky he was, where no one had mentioned that luck was relative, that fortune was a coin with my face on one side and Vivian's on the other. "I'm pregnant," she said. 3 months, and it's complicated. The father is engaged to someone else. Someone I thought was my friend. I waited. There was always more with Vivian, always another layer to the drama, always a role for me to play in the theater of her disasters. "I can't be Vivian right now," she continued, the tears accelerating, the performance gathering momentum. "I can't face everyone, the questions, the judgment. I need to be someone else. Just for a day, just for your wedding." She reached for my hand, her fingers cold despite the July heat. "Let me walk down the aisle as you. Let me wear your dress, say your vows, kiss your husband. Just for the ceremony. Then we'll switch back, I'll disappear, and you'll have your perfect day." It was absurd. I knew it was absurd even as she said it, even as the tequila on her breath reached me, even as some part of me, the part that had been Vivian's other half for 30 years, began to calculate how it could work. "Viv, that's insane. Daniel would know, he wouldn't." She squeezed my hand hard. "Ev, think about it, we're identical, DNA identical. The only difference is how we act, and I can act like you. I've done it 100 times. Exams, dates, that job interview at the bank when you were sick. I know your walk, your voice, the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're nervous. He's my fiancé, he knows me. Does he?" Vivian's voice shifted, something sharp beneath the tears. "Does he know that you hate mushrooms but eat them at his mother's house to be polite? Does he know that you fake your orgasms because you're too embarrassed to tell him what you actually need? Does he know that you only applied to teach at Emerson because I dared you to, because you were going to settle for community college and I wouldn't let you?" Each question landed like a small wound, precise and bleeding. She was right. Daniel knew the version of me I'd constructed for him, careful, accommodating, the Evelyn who was grateful for his attention, who didn't make demands, who fit into his life like a piece he'd found rather than a whole person he'd chosen. "He loves you," Vivian said, softer now, the tears returning. "He does. But he doesn't know you. Not the way I do. And for one day, Ev, just one day, I need to be someone who is loved. Someone who has a future. Someone who isn't the mess I've made of my life." I should have said no. Every version of myself that existed outside of Vivian's gravitational pull knew this was wrong, destructive, the kind of boundary violation that ended relationships and lives. But I was tired. Tired of being the good twin, the responsible one, the woman who earned everything and was never quite enough. Tired of the wedding that felt like performance, the marriage that felt like acquisition, the life that felt borrowed even as I built it. "Just the ceremony," I heard myself say. "Then we switch, before the reception." Vivian hugged me hard, her tears wet against my neck, her body shaking with relief that might have been genuine or might have been the opening act of a play she'd been rehearsing for months. "Thank you, Ev. Thank you, I'll never forget this. Never." She forgot by midnight. The switch was simple. We'd done it so many times, the childhood games, the adolescent experiments, the adult deceptions that had become our private mythology. I helped her into my dress, pinned her hair the way I wore mine, coached her on Daniel's habits, his preferences, the small talk that would carry her through the receiving line. "You're nervous," I told her, watching her in the mirror, my face on her body, my future on her shoulders. "That's normal, just breathe, he'll think it's bridal jitters." "And you?" She turned to look at me, really look, the way she hadn't in years. "What will you do?" "I'll wait at the hotel, the one we booked for the wedding night. You come after the ceremony, we switch back, I return to the reception as myself." I handed her my bouquet, white roses, simple, the kind of flowers that didn't compete with the dress. 2 hours, Vive, 3 at most. Then this is over. She kissed my cheek, her lipstick leaving a mark I'd have to remove later. 2 hours, I promise. I watched her leave, my dress swirling around her ankles, my veil catching the light, my future walking away on legs that had always been faster, bolder, more certain of their destination than mine. The hotel was 3 blocks from the church. I walked, still in the clothes I'd worn to help Vivian prepare, a sundress that felt suddenly childish, insufficient for the day I was supposed to be having. The room was ready, champagne on ice, rose petals on the bed, the clichés that Daniel had arranged because he thought they were romantic, because he didn't know me well enough to know I'd have preferred a bookshelf and a quiet dinner. I waited, 2 hours, 3, 4. The text came at midnight after I'd drunk half the champagne and called Vivian's phone 17 times. "I'm sorry, Ev, he didn't notice, not once." And when I told him after, when we were alone, he said he'd known. From the first kiss. He'd always known which one was which. He just chose me, because I was more, because you were never enough, even when you were yourself. I read it 3 times. Then I threw the phone against the wall, watched it shatter, the pieces scattering across rose petals that suddenly looked like blood. I didn't go to the church. Didn't storm the reception, didn't expose Vivian, didn't demand explanations from Daniel in front of our families and friends. I sat in the hotel room until dawn, drinking the rest of the champagne warm and flat, watching the rose petals wilt, understanding something that would define the next 5 years of my life. Vivian hadn't stolen my wedding. I'd given it to her. And Daniel had accepted the substitution, had played along, had chosen the performance over the person. Whether he'd known from the first kiss or discovered it later didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd woken up next to my twin and decided to stay. I checked out at 6 a.m., paid cash for the room damage, walked to the bus station in clothes that smelled of champagne and defeat. I didn't go home, didn't have a home anymore. The apartment leased to Daniel, the life constructed around a marriage that had lasted less than 12 hours. I went to a motel, the kind that rented by the week, the kind where no one asked names or noticed faces. And I made a decision. Not to disappear, that would be too simple, too expected, the Evelyn response to crisis. To transform. To become Vivian, the twin who took, who survived, who never apologized for wanting more than she had. It took research. Planning. The kind of methodical work that had always been my strength, applied now to destruction rather than construction. I accessed Vivian's accounts, passwords we'd shared since adolescence, security questions whose answers were our shared history. I learned her routines, her relationships, her debts and dependencies. I discovered that she'd lied about the pregnancy, that she'd planned the switch for months, maybe years, waiting for the moment when my guard was lowest, my need for her highest. That Daniel had indeed known, not from the first kiss, but from the first night. When Vivian's boldness in bed revealed what my caution had hidden. He'd chosen not to say anything because the deception was exciting, because Vivian was thrilling, because I'd always been enough but never more. I also discovered that Vivian was unhappy. The marriage she'd stolen was not the prize she'd imagined. Daniel was kind but distant, absorbed in his work, expecting the wife he'd acquired to manage his life without demanding his attention. Vivian, who needed constant stimulation, who fed on drama and novelty, was bored within months. She had affairs, discreet at first, then less so. She spent money, Daniel's money, on things she didn't need. She performed the role of Evelyn, careful, accommodating, grateful while slowly suffocating inside the costume she demanded. I watched from a distance. Built a new life as Vivian, the name easier to adopt than I'd expected, the personality harder but not impossible. I bleached my hair, added tattoos, cultivated the recklessness that had always been Vivian's armor. I worked jobs she might have worked, bartending, freelance writing, the gig economy of someone who lived without plans or consequences. And then I approached her. It took 2 years. I let her see me first, at a coffee shop, across a restaurant, the ghost of herself that made her double take, reach for wine, look away. I built a story. Vivian had hit bottom, been in rehab, was trying to make amends. I sent letters, carefully crafted, apologetic without admitting specifics, the kind of communication that made her feel less guilty rather than more. She bit. Invited me to coffee, then dinner, then the intimacy of confession that she'd always craved. I listened to her complain about Daniel, about the children she'd had, twin girls, the irony not lost on me about the life that looked perfect from outside and felt empty within. I was the perfect confidante because I was her, because I knew exactly what to say, exactly when to nod, exactly how to validate her choices while planting seeds of doubt. You deserve more, I told her again and again. You gave up so much for this life, for him, and he doesn't even appreciate who you really are. He never did, she agreed, the wine loosening her tongue, the years of performance finally cracking. He wanted Evelyn, he got me, and he can't tell the difference or doesn't care. He knows, I said, the lie smooth as silk. He always knew, he just likes that you're easier, less demanding, more accommodating. She cried then, the real tears that had always been her gift, the ones that made everyone around her want to fix, to comfort, to give her what she wanted. I comforted her, held her, felt her body shake against mine, the body that shared my DNA, my face, my history, and had used all of it to take everything I'd built. I became indispensable. The aunt who babysat, the friend who listened, the sister who understood in ways that Daniel never could. I learned her children's names, my children's names, genetically, biologically, though they'd never know me as mother. I learned their routines, their fears, the small ways they were like me and the larger ways they were like her. And I waited, gathered evidence, recorded conversations, saved texts, documented the affairs she confessed to me in moments of vulnerability. Not for legal action, I had no standing, no proof of the original deception that would hold in court. For the moment when presentation would be more powerful than prosecution. That moment came on her 10th wedding anniversary. The party was Daniel's idea. Renew our vows, he said. Celebrate a decade. Vivian agreed because she loved performance, because 10 years of marriage was an achievement she could display, because she still believed that the life she'd stolen was worth celebrating. I organized it. Offered, insisted, made myself indispensable to the planning. Vivian, grateful for the help, distracted by her own unhappiness, didn't notice the details I controlled, the guest list, the venue, the AV equipment. The ceremony was in the same church where I'd been supposed to marry Daniel. I stood in the back, watching Vivian walk down the aisle in white, the dress more expensive than mine had been, the smile more practiced, the performance more polished after 10 years of practice. Daniel waited at the altar, older, grayer, the same expression of patient expectation he'd worn at our wedding. I waited until the vows were complete, until the kiss was exchanged, until the reception was in full swing and the alcohol had loosened inhibitions. Then I took the microphone. Before we toast, I said, my voice carrying through the speakers I'd personally tested, I'd like to show something, a video I found of Vivian and me when we were girls. The screen lit up. Home footage, our mother filming, our father laughing, two girls, identical, switching places in a game. Who's who? Our mother asked, and we giggled, the secret ours alone. Then adult footage. The night before the wedding, recorded by a camera I'd hidden, Vivian's confession about the pregnancy that didn't exist. The text messages, displayed large, her words to me at midnight. He didn't notice, he chose me. The recording of a recent conversation, Vivian drunk, admitting to me, to Vivian, that sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd let Ev have her day. But it's too late now, too late for both of us. The room went silent. Vivian's face, projected beside her real face, created a double image that made people blink, unsure which was present, which was past, which was true. Daniel stood slowly, looking from the screen to his wife to me, standing now at the front of the room, wearing the same dress I'd worn the night before my wedding, the one Vivian had borrowed, the one that had started everything. You knew, I said to him, not a question. From the first night. Maybe the first kiss. You knew she wasn't me, and you didn't say anything, because she was easier. Because I asked for too much attention, honesty, a relationship that required you to see me rather than acquire me. He didn't deny it. Couldn't, with the evidence glowing behind him, with 200 witnesses watching his silence confirm everything. And you, I turned to Vivian, who was frozen, her champagne glass suspended, her face the mask she wore when performing emotions she didn't feel. You took everything. My wedding, my husband, the life I built, and you made it look like charity, like need, like sisterhood, when it was always greed, always envy, always the belief that what was mine should be yours because you wanted it more. I set down the microphone, walked to the center of the room where a small table held 2 glasses, one for me, one for the sister who was supposed to be there. I poured from a bottle I'd brought, the same tequila Vivian had carried to my apartment 10 years before. "I don't want your life back," I said to Vivian, to Daniel, to the room that held my history and my absence. "I don't want your marriage, your children, your performance of happiness. I spent 5 years becoming you, Vivian, to understand what you took. And I discovered that you took nothing worth having. Daniel chose performance over substance. You chose acquisition over connection. And I chose to disappear rather than demand what I deserved." I raised my glass. "So here's to the wedding that never was, to the sister who was also my shadow, to the husband who couldn't tell the difference and didn't care to try, and to me, Evelyn, finally, after 10 years of being someone else. May I never again be so easy to replace." I drank, set down the glass, walked out of the church, through the doors where I'd been supposed to enter as a bride, into the afternoon light that felt like the first honest thing I'd experienced in a decade. I didn't see Vivian for 3 years. Didn't see Daniel, didn't contact the children who were biologically mine in every way except the one that mattered. I rebuilt, slowly, carefully, the way I'd built before, but with boundaries now, with the knowledge of what I'd allowed and what I'd become. I changed my name legally, not back to Evelyn, not forward to anything else. I chose a new name entirely, one that Vivian had never worn, that Daniel had never heard, that belonged only to me. I taught at a community college, then a state university, finally a small private school where my publications mattered less than my presence. I dated, badly at first, then better, learning to be seen rather than performed, to want rather than accommodate. Vivian found me eventually. Not dramatically, an email, then a coffee, then the cautious negotiation of 2 people who shared DNA but no longer shared history. She was divorced, she said. Daniel had left after the party, unable to explain, unable to stay. The children were with him, mostly. She'd never been maternal, had performed that role as she'd performed everything else. "I thought you'd destroy me," she said, stirring coffee she didn't drink. "The video, the evidence, you could have." "I wanted to," I admitted. For years, that wanting was the only thing that kept me moving, but destruction is easy. Building is harder, and I was tired of being easy. She looked at me, really looked, the way she hadn't in the years when I'd been her mirror, her confidante, her unwitting victim. "You look different," she said. "Not the hair, the tattoos, something else." "I'm whole," I said. "For the first time, not half of a pair, not the quiet twin, not your opposite or your shadow. Just me, Evelyn, or whoever I choose to be. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that I chose it. We meet now, once a year, on the anniversary of the wedding that never was. Not as sisters, not really, the trust is too broken, the history too loaded. As 2 women who share a face and have learned, finally, to occupy separate spaces. We don't talk about Daniel, or the children, or the years I spent as her ghost. We talk about books, movies, small observations that require no vulnerability. I still have the dress. The original, the one Vivian wore down the aisle, the one I wore to her anniversary party. It's in storage, preserved in acid-free paper, a relic of a self I no longer am. Sometimes I take it out, hold it to my face, smell the faint traces of perfume and memory, then I put it back. The past doesn't need to be destroyed. It just needs to be contained. Daniel reached out once by email, 5 years after the party. "I made a mistake," he wrote. "I knew from the first kiss I should have said something, I should have chosen you." I didn't reply, there was nothing to say. He hadn't chosen me because I hadn't given him a self to choose. I'd been too accommodating, too grateful, too willing to disappear into the role of wife before I'd established the person of Evelyn. His mistake was real. But it was also inevitable, the product of 2 people who performed connection rather than built it. I am 40 now. I teach, I write. I have a small apartment with bookshelves and a cat who doesn't care what my name is. I date occasionally, with the caution of someone who knows how easily identity can be stolen, how readily others accept the performance rather than demand the substance. And I am Evelyn. Finally, completely, the name I chose to keep despite everything, the identity I reclaimed from my twin and my husband, and the years I spent becoming someone else to understand what they'd taken. I am not half of a pair, not a reflection, not a shadow that disappears when the light shifts. I am the light itself. And that solid, singular, unshared existence is the only revenge that matters. See you in the next story.